And we're back. Hello. Welcome back to Peak Human. I'm Brian Sanders. As always, go back to episode 1. Work your way backwards or start from episode 1. So many good episodes. Can't tell you enough how many people are gaining so much from going back and listening to all these. I only do good episodes with good people. Please also give a review on iTunes or any podcast app you listen on. And please support Nose to Tail. That's how this podcast is possible. You can go to nosetotale.org and get yourself a box of meat, get yourself skin food made from beef tallow, even soap. We got deodorant now. We have all kinds of great products. We use regenerative practices. It's great stuff, raised in the US, raised in Texas by my family farmers. But now let's talk about today's episode with Dr. Molly. Dr. Molly is my friend here in Austin. If anyone's wondering, I did go to the potluck she invited me to during this episode. Really cool crowd, lots of great health people. We had an amazing discussion, amazing dinner. I brought my nose to tail primal bison with the organs mixed in and made some primal burger patties. It was so good. We got into a ton of great stuff in this episode. Molly's really on the same page. She also focuses on women's health, which we touched on at the end. I wanted to make sure we did a general episode for everyone and then touched on the more female stuff at the end, which still could be applicable to other people so they can know how females work. Surprisingly, everyone has some sort of female in their life. So maybe this can apply and maybe they can help them. Dr. Molly Maloof is a Healthspan Doctor determined to maximize our potential with health optimization, biohacking, and personalized wellness. Founder of multiple wellness-focused organizations and having served as medical advisor for a multitude of brands, she's on a mission to help us all live our best lives through education and health awareness. She is the author of Spark Factor, The Secret to Supercharging Energy, Becoming Resilient, and Feeling Better Than Ever, which is now on sale. It's on sale today. What timing? Support her. Go order the book. I'm sure you can find it anywhere online. Go to drmolly.co, learn more about her. I'm happy to find another friend here in Austin that's on the same path, believes in the same thing, and is working to get everyone healthier in America and the world. So a few other updates before we begin. I'm busy working on the Food Lies series. Go watch the trailer on the Food Lies YouTube channel if you haven't watched it yet. I'm telling you, it's a huge project. I'm working every day till 11 p.m. most nights. Support us on Indiegogo. Go to foodlies.org. You can find out more about the film and link to the Indiegogo campaign there. We still need contributions because we're doing this all on our own. We don't have a team. We're trying to get this on Netflix. We're trying to make this huge. And it's not easy because it's just my director and I, and we're doing all the work. And we don't get paid. So the only way I pay rent is through Nose to Tail, nosetotale.org. I have the family ranchers. They raise the meat. I get it to you. It goes straight to your door. You can make yourself a custom box, all 48 states. We also have other products like the biltong dried meat. We have the livervores, which is the dried meat, the South African version, air dried, no sugar, no curing agents, and it has liver in it. It has 30% liver. Good way to sneak liver in your diet. Kind of like our primal ground beef or the bison I mentioned. We grind up the organs and put it in our meat. We also have beef tallow skincare, soap, deodorant, skin food, which is a moisturizer, and we have seasonings. We kind of have it all. These products are super quality, all small batch. This is a boutique operation. We're not making a lot of money off it. The point is we're doing well. We just aren't price gouging people. These are high-end products that cost a lot to make, and I'm happy to do it so that people can get these quality products. I just want people to know this is not some Walmart operation. We're not mass producing anything. We are not jacking up the prices. This is just what it costs. It's quality. It's at nosetotale.org. Support the ranchers and support our small team. So that's all at nosetotale.org. Join the newsletter at sapien.org. Just once a week, just good information. And enjoy this one with Dr. Molly. Hey, Dr. Molly, how's it going?
Fantastic. How's it going with you?
I'm great, except for my camera's not working well.
Oh, man.
We're getting going, though. We're both in Austin. We couldn't do this in person. Two busy people. We'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Maybe next time.
Yeah, totally. It's been a crazy month trying to get this book off the ground. I've never launched a book before, and it's quite the experience. There's one thing to write a book and it's another thing to market a book. So if anyone out there is listening and you're thinking of writing a book, remember, it's not just about the writing. That's only a portion of the challenge.
Yeah. Well, I've been talking to people about the Food Lies book
to go along with the film, and they're like, we need a full year to do the
Oh yeah.
process of
Oh
marketing
yeah.
and
I mean,
getting
this
it.
book has been 3 years for me. I mean, from concept to proposal to book deal to writing to marketing, it was a 3-year process. And so, I mean, I'm obviously a very busy woman. I've got a lot of other things going on besides my book, but if you have the time, I think you could compress that. But it is a whole thing. I mean, because like what people don't tell you about like writing a book is like you need an agent, and then you need to pitch it to all these publishers if you're not going to self publish. And so then it's like kind of like sorority rush where you just go and you pitch, and then
Mhm.
they fight over you, and then they give you a deal, and then you negotiate the deal, and you decide if you wanted to change your terms,
Yeah.
and then you have to write the book, and then you have to edit the book, and then you have to like record the book, and then you have to market the book, and so it's a whole thing. But I think you should definitely write one along with your documentary.
It should happen. I'll learn from you.
Happy to
We
help.
met. We met in Austin. Oh, we'll get into your book. It's called Spark Factor. I have a
Yeah,
PDF copy. I couldn't finish it, but we'll get into that as we get
sure.
along in this podcast. But yeah, we met through a mutual friend. You came to the Sapien Center in Austin. We had an amazing little dinner and
Yeah, you have
hangout
great events
session.
there. The place is
Yeah.
awesome.
Well, more to come. So yeah, let's jump into it. Tell me about yourself. You have a Stanford sweater on.
Oh yeah, I have a Stanford sweatshirt on. So I didn't go to Stanford. I went to University of Illinois College of Medicine for my medical degree, and then moved to the Bay Area, and did part of my residency, got my license, started my medical practice, and started working with startups. And this was like early, I don't know, 2011, 2012 or so. And so my career has largely been built around innovation and personal health technology, wearable tech, biotech, digital health, supplements, and food. And then, so as I was building my medical practice, I was basically like, how do I build a practice that optimizes health and not just fixes sickness? So most of what my practice does is like help executives, investors, and entrepreneurs achieve as optimal health as they can possibly have because they have really demanding lifestyles. But I also do a little bit of personalized medical research. So if somebody comes to me with a really weird medical problem that no one else can solve, I have like a team of people that help me do research on solving weird medical problems. So one of my first jobs out of my residency was actually working for a company funded by Peter Thiel, and it was like doing personalized medical research. So I learned a lot about using data driven, going to PubMed and like looking at the primary research and just like assessing which papers were good and then coming up with conclusions. So it taught me a lot about bioinformatics. But then, I built my practice and I built my reputation in tech as being an innovator and somebody with a lot of foresight. And then I got the entrepreneurship bug a few years ago and I started building companies. And that's been an incredible journey. I have a company called Adama Bioscience. I also started teaching at Stanford in I think it was 2018, 2019, 2019. So I taught there for 3 years. I taught a course on Healthspan. They actually asked me to teach at Stanford. And I was like, whoa, this is a really cool opportunity. Stanford's changed a lot in the last few years. So I did move to Austin and kind of like let go of that role. But it did shape a lot of my worldview and beliefs. Just having to put your thoughts in a structured format for teaching is like a really great practice. And that's what the book really came out of, was both my practice, my work in innovation, and then teaching at Stanford. So I've had a really incredible last 10 years of a journey of my career.
I like it. Yeah, no,
Yeah.
I know about your kind of background and philosophies on food and health and metabolism, and I think we're really on the same page.
Yeah.
Health span's huge. Maybe you can kind of start there. Let's talk about health
Yeah.
span.
So I was in Silicon Valley and everybody was like, longevity, 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 longevity. And there were so many companies and funds coming out around longevity. And all of these companies were looking for small molecule solutions to get people to live to 150. And I was like, yeah, drugs are great. And don't get me wrong, I take a ton of supplements.
Mhm.
But I was just like, there's something missing here. And I was looking at a lot of these longevity experts and they didn't look young. They looked really old. And I was like,
Hmm.
there's something disconnected here between these people who care about longevity and frankly, a lot of the A4M people that I would meet were like, they looked really old. And I hate to say it, but like I felt like there was something wrong with this movement to live as long as possible, because to me, it was like about stretching your body to get to 150. And health span is different. Health span is about living as long as possible without disease or disability. So it's about compressing morbidity to the very end of life. And it turns out in my research, I discovered that supercentenarians, in fact, have the longest health spans. So I was like, why are we not aiming for health span? Why are we aiming for lifespan? When lifespan, I mean, like anybody can live long and have like lots of surgery and drugs, but I don't want to live long and have lots of surgery and drugs. I want to have like a really long and healthy life, and I want to figure out how to do that. So that's what led me to studying health span as a field. And so that's really something that relies on lifestyle prevention and optimizing metabolism fundamentally. Because if you don't look at like health span is really to me a product of your mitochondrial function. This is my own personal belief. This is what a lot of people are learning to understand. But mitochondria dysfunction is the root cause, in my opinion, of a lot of chronic metabolic diseases. And as we're learning from work like by Christopher Palmer, MD, a lot of mental health. And so what's killing us nowadays is not necessarily these rare diseases of genetics. What's killing us is our lifestyles. And it's cancer, diabetes, heart disease, and dementia. And a lot of these are rooted in metabolic dysfunction. And as we're learning, a lot of diseases of despair and, essentially depression, anxiety, even schizophrenia, seizure disorders, we're finding these have root causes in mitochondria as well. So I got obsessed with mitochondria because I was like, I feel like I found a root cause for a lot of modern diseases that are going to kill us, right? And I don't want to die from these diseases, and I don't think you do either. So I built a course and I wrote a book about the mitochondria and how these play a role in health and disease, and essentially how these function as batteries and capacitors to keep our bodies running. And so if we want to run our body as long as possible, we got to maintain the batteries. And it's like anything else in our life. Like when funny thing about my life is it seems like my batteries of my computer and my phone are the things that break first. And then the phone stops working and the computer stops working and I have to get a new one. Well, the thing about our bodies is we don't get new bodies. We only have one of these. So it's really important that we mind our mitochondria if we want to live a long and healthy life.
It's so important. And we were talking about our kind of PhD influences, people we look up to, Dr. Chris Palmer, Dr. Ben Bickman, Dr. Dion D'Agostino. These guys are great. They're in the film. They're on my show. Inspirations to me. And they all talk about this metabolic health and down to the mitochondrial level.
Exactly.
And all these diet and lifestyle stuff, people don't really realize it, but you're getting down to that mitochondrial level with these things. And one more thing, Dr. Michael Rose, I'll throw him out there because I'm going to go interview him in a month.
Oh, tell me about him.
He is legendary. So you're talking about these people, the longevity people that don't look very young. This guy, I would bet my entire life savings that this guy was 45. So I watched a presentation to him like, this guy's 45. Then I find out he's 65. It completely blew my mind. I'm like, I'm not like being generous.
Is he this orthopedic sports medicine surgeon?
No, Dr. Michael Rose, he's an aging researcher. He does a lot of this fruit fly research. If you put in fruit fly, you'll find him. Yeah. He's epic PhD. He's in Irvine. He talks about just this diet and lifestyle stuff.
My God, he's how old?
He's 65. Now he's probably 67 by now.
That's amazing.
He's a legend.
See, I trust people who look younger than their age when they're researching this stuff. Like, I'm not going to call out some names, but there's people out there that study fasting and study longevity in San Francisco and LA, and they just look like they're 20 years older than they are. And you're like, how can I trust what you're doing if you don't look young? And maybe some people get different genetics, right? We all have different, we're all handed different cards, but it looks like genetics is only 10 to 20% of our aging future.
I believe it. I'm actually 59. Yeah. No, I'm just joking. I'm 39.
Oh my God,
amazing. No, I'm 39. People, I'm still getting you look younger for your age, so it's good. You have to live the lifestyle. I think some people don't live it, and I know Michael Rose lives it. He's kind of just on the paleo principles. He's like, I eat real food. I eat meat and animal foods, and I eat whole foods, and that's it. And he looks great.
Amazing. So, I've read this guy's work, actually. I just never saw a photo of him.
Well, he's talking about this aging. He wrote a book called Does Aging Stop? He's talking about a lot of these really interesting things. And what I took from it is as you age, you are less forgiving with the modern world. So it's not that your metabolism slows down as you age. It's that you are less adapted to get away with modern life, right? So you need to go back to the more ancient principles of human health.
I would argue that everybody needs to look at this the same way. So, like, one of the biggest reasons why we do age in modern life is because our lifestyles are very out of sync with our genetics, right? So we have these primitive genetics that are designed for the savannah, and we would be, essentially running at moderate intensity endurance throughout the day. Like, people used to spend all day on the savannah hunting and gathering and moving. And now we sit in front of our computers. We eat all day long. People are snacking all day long. They're fasting as little as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And so that is very energetically taxing on the mitochondria. It just it spends a lot of calories and energy. You actually have to use a lot of energy to digest your food. And so there's this thing called organ reserve that not a lot of people understand. But like, you genuinely have only so much metabolic function until you die. And if you overtax your body with sugar and starch and foods that are frankly, like, do cause the mitochondria to be like, essentially taxed, like high fat, high carb foods, in particular packaged processed foods, fast foods, ultra processed foods, fried foods, fried carbs. These foods basically cause metabolic gridlock in the mitochondria, and it causes a backlog of fuel, and it causes the fuel that is burning to be prioritized to carbohydrates. And so now you have all this fat lying around. What are we going to do with this fat? Well, we're going to store it as visceral fat. And this is one of the biggest problems in metabolic health. It's actually not about your BMI in as much as it's about your body composition. So what we're learning is that there's quite a lot of people that are skinny fat, and they have normal BMI, but they actually have a lot of visceral fat. And it's largely because they're inactive, and they're eating the wrong foods, and they're eating too much food. And so the body has to store this fat somewhere. And the visceral fat, if it gets stored there, that's where it starts to damage your organs. That's where it starts to cause metabolic dysfunction. And a lot of people are getting, non-alcoholic fatty liver disease. And it's really preventable. The thing is, it's totally preventable, but we're not supposed to be eating these ultra processed foods. We're supposed to be moving our bodies consistently. We're supposed to be eating whole foods, not as often as we're eating. And as a result of our modern lifestyles with our primitive genetics, there's a mismatch. And this happens, when we're young, we can handle, eating crap, right? We don't, like, when I was in my 20s, I could eat carbs galore. It didn't matter. Now that I'm in my 30s, I have to be really careful. Like, this morning, I had a little bit of a blood sugar spike on my CGM. And I was like, man, what did that come from? And I was like, oh, I bought some cassava crackers for a dinner party tonight. And I was like, dang, I really didn't think these were going to spike my blood sugar, because they had a fair amount of fiber in them. But you never really know unless you wear technology to actually monitor your metabolism. So a big piece of what I'm writing about in the book is, we already know how to be healthy. We know we need to eat better. We know we need to exercise more. We know we need to stress less. But how do we do that with modern lives without, in my opinion, we have to monitor our health. So I wear an Oura ring. I use a blood sugar monitor. I use a metabolic flexibility monitor. I monitor my steps. I monitor my movement, my sleep, and my stress. And these are the biggest drivers of metabolic dysfunction. And so we now have technology that we can monitor these things with.
Yeah, I've always been interested in that stuff. I've worn CGMs. I've tried those devices, all those things. Super important. Well, yeah, what have you learned about blood sugar? There's so many different ways we could go with this, but let's dive into blood sugar real quick and also the difference in carbs, because I'm not saying carbs are bad. It's like huge difference between types of carbs.
So there's certainly a lot, at least every book that I've read recently on metabolism, like Dom's books, Ben's books, the book The Switch by my friend James Clement, and even Chris Palmer's book. Like, a lot of these books really do emphasize low carb ketogenic dieting. But as I found, for women in particular, we have to be a little bit more careful with how we consume carbohydrates and how we, what I would call, flip the metabolic switch. So I used to be, I found that during the pandemic, I was in continuous ketosis for a lot of it, and then it stopped working for me. And I was like, what's going on here? And it turns out that for me, the stress level that I was under, combined with the stress of ketosis, was not working for my metabolism anymore. And I was like, oh shit, I need more carbs. And that was a big lesson for me. And a big lesson in that I'm trying to teach people in the book is, like, I think it's important to use things like ketosis and carb cycling and intermittent fasting as tools in the toolbox to improve metabolic health and metabolic flexibility. But what I found is that cycling in and out of ketosis is a lot more effective for my body as a woman than being in continuous ketosis. Like, it was a big wake up call for me. And it was when I was learning about mitohormetic stressors that I realized that, like, there's really only so much stress that you can put your body under as a human before it will break. And the thing about ketosis and fasting is these are stressors. So is exercise. So is cold plunge. So is, the work of our daily existence. And we have to be careful with how much stress we put our body under, because stress alone is going to raise cortisol, and it's going to create insulin resistance on its own. So, like last year, during the stress of building a company, teaching at Stanford, fundraising, finishing a book, my cortisol levels got a little out of hand. And I started measuring, I measured them pretty much every 3 to 6 months, depending on if I have time. And what a lot of people don't realize about, monitoring metabolism is that it's not just the carbs you eat, it's actually the insulin sensitivity you have to those carbohydrates. So I noticed that when my cortisol was high, my blood sugar was high, no matter what kind of carbs I consumed. And this is a big thing that a lot of people haven't realized, is that, like, it's not just about the carbs you eat, it's about the stress that you actually are under that changes your metabolism. So there's this interplay between our food and our stress levels that our mitochondria have to sense and integrate, and then determine what is the next best course of action. And at the end of the day, under stress, your mitochondria are going to prioritize survival over reproduction. And that's one of the reasons why women in particular have to be careful with how we stress our bodies with metabolic stressors, with exercise, and with, psychosocial stress, because we can really throw off our hormones without realizing it. And a lot of women struggle with weight loss resistance, and they're like, well, I'm not eating any carbs, and I'm like, I'm exercising constantly, and I'm in a calorie deficit, and I'm not losing weight. And it's like, well, there's a reason for that, because your mitochondria are being told that they are under threat. And under threat, your entire metabolism will shift into what's called the cell danger response. And that will literally create the conditions where you will hold on to every single calorie so that you cannot lose the weight on purpose, because your body wants to keep you alive in the setting of high stress. So as much as it's important to look at your macronutrients and to eat a proper healthy diet and to get enough calories, when people are looking at improving metabolism and losing weight, it's not just about calories in, calories out. It's about the entire environment that you're living in. It's about the psychosocial stressors that you have. And it's about how you are literally adapting to the demands that your lifestyle has placed upon you.
There's so much more to it. To the blood sugar, it's like, it's the type of carbs you're eating. It's the stress you're under. It's the sleep. Like, if you don't get enough, there's studies about that. If you don't get enough sleep, your blood sugar's all over the place.
Your cortisol will go up.
So there's so much more context to keeping your blood sugar in control and being healthy than just simple calories. Of course, I hate that calories in, calories out stuff. And then just what's going on in your life, and
I mean, look at this. Turns out that there's like a drug that they feed cows that literally creates the conditions where the cow will put on 30% more calories with the same amount of food.
More
like,
weight?
If that's possible.
More weight, not
30% more weight. Sorry. And 30% more weight with put on more weight with 30% less food being fed to them. So, like, they can get the cow to gain weight on less food, which is fascinating. And then, like, some farmers even feed cows antibiotics specifically to make them gain weight. And we're learning that dysbiosis in the gut can actually change the bacterial milieu, create the conditions where the bacteria will harvest more energy from your food, cause you to gain more weight. So, like, it's really important that people realize that we are not a closed system. Calories in, calories out is an old theory that doesn't fit within modern science. It's obviously important for, like, if you are going to try to lose weight, you are going to want to make a calorie deficit. But I think it's far more important for people to focus on body composition than weight, because you really want to get that muscle tone, and you really want to reduce that visceral fat if you want to have optimal health.
Super important. This is something we're doing in the film right now, talking about you can be thin and still be healthy. Like, everyone knows, well, maybe not everyone these days.
You can be fat and healthy. You can be thin and unhealthy.
Yeah.
Turns
on both
out.
sides. And we got to let people know. And a lot of it is about visceral fat, and it's like body composition. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Basically, your muscle mass compared to your fat mass or visceral fat mass is kind of like a better indication. Like, even just using a waist to height ratio. I like Dr. Ted Naiman because he's just like, it's just simple. You could just you do these simple things and it tells you so much more than what we thought was correct, like cholesterol levels or something.
Oh my gosh. I mean, the thing about cholesterol that blows my mind is like the fact that people don't realize that there's a huge relationship between cholesterol and metabolic health and like specifically microbiome health. So like when you release endotoxin into the bloodstream, that literally will create the conditions where LDL will go up and HDL will go down because HDL actually plays a role in removing endotoxin, which is fascinating. And I didn't even know this. So I was like, whoa, whoa, whoa. How come no one taught me this in medical school? And yet it's like so many doctors are still just prescribing statins across the board, thinking that this is the answer for all of our problems. Meanwhile, we're learning that a lot of statins create the conditions for diabetes, which we know causes heart disease. And I'm like, oh my God, people don't even doctors aren't even recommending coenzyme Q10 with statins. We know that statins deplete coenzyme Q10. We know coenzyme Q10 is important for mitochondrial function. How is this not modern medicine? How is this not like, I just don't get it. Like, it's so backwards to me. And it really worries me for the health of a lot of people in this country.
Well, that's what I do a lot on Instagram, just expose the sick care system and how it's not about keeping people healthy. And like it's really just profit driven stuff and people are kind of in their thing. And well, it's kind of like you didn't choose to go down the normal doctor path because I think you woke up.
I was in the hospital and I was literally on a pediatric cancer ward, which by the way was like one of my weird childhood dreams because I read Cancer Ward by Solzhenitsyn in 6th grade. And I was like, someday I'm going to be a doctor and I'm going to take care of kids with cancer. And I got to that point and I saw us feeding kids with serious cancers, cake, candy, and like whatever they wanted with sugar. And I was like, hey, am I the only one here who knows how cancer works? Because it feeds on glucose. Why are we fueling these children with food that we know is feeding their cancer? And I got looked at like a crazy person. I mean, I was like, people were like, you're nuts. And I was like, they're like, these kids have cancer. Let them have whatever they want. They're going to die anyway. And I was like, aren't we here to keep them alive? Like, aren't we here to like make sure that they don't pass? And it was really heartbreaking for me. And so I was like, look, I'm seeing all these diseases, younger and younger ages. I was in pediatrics before I went into, concierge medicine. And I was just flabbergasted at how the modern medicine was like so guidelines based. And it really wasn't about using your basic physiology training that you learned in medical school. Like none of that made it into actual practice. It was all about what do the guidelines say? What's in the formulary? What are you allowed to practice? And anything that was outside of that was just like, no. And I didn't become a doctor because I wanted to be thinking like everybody else. I wanted to become a doctor because I thought it offered me an opportunity to actually think about the body and create, think about scientific, principles and apply those. And unfortunately, a lot of what I saw in the hospital was really smart doctors kind of ignoring their education and going by what the sort of system told them they could do. And that scared me a lot because I was just like, and I also was just like really afraid because I was watching like these doctors that were my attendings. I remember this one day, this one doctor came to work and she had literally lymph nodes popping out of her arms across her body. And I was just like, oh my God, this system is going to make me ill. Like I'm going to get sick. Like I literally don't think that I'm going to stay healthy in the system. I'm going to end up ill like all these doctors are. And when all these physicians are super sick, trying to treat sickness, and you realize what you're working in is a sickness billing industrial complex. It's not actually a healthcare system. So like health is the ability to adapt and self-manage in the face of adversity. And the word adapt is really important because adaptation is a signal of health. It's, are you adapting to your environment? This medical system is about billing and coding for disease. And it's about getting you to make sure you're not dead, but it's not about getting you to optimal health whatsoever. It doesn't care about your health long term. It really only cares about you making sure that you stay alive for like the next 5 years. The most interesting thing about healthcare and insurance is that most of these insurance companies are not like life insurance companies. Life insurance companies want to see you live a long life. And I'm actually going to start doing some consulting work and innovation with the life insurance company because I think that life insurance might be a big opportunity for longevity innovation. Health insurance companies are interestingly only interested in keeping you alive for like the next 5 years because they know you're going to rotate in and out of healthcare. They know that you're going to be probably not even on the same insurance company in the next 5 years. So their models are not built on longevity. Their models are built on short-term health. And when I learned that, I was like, well, this explains a lot, So, I mean, sadly, a lot of my predictions around healthcare have come true. I used to lobby for healthcare reform when I was in medical school. And I was like, oh, wow, we're going to see a two-tiered system. It's going to be a cash-based system, and it's going to be a private, it's going to be like a public option. And so what we'll end up inevitably be seeing is Medicaid and Medicare are going to start expanding to everyone over the next 20 years. And then we're going to have this dual system where there's going to be cash pay concierge on one end, and there's going to be the public option on the other end. So that's coming, and that's interesting because I didn't anticipate there being so much consumer technology health services coming out, but that's also a big thing that's going to be continuing to grow, is like consumer based products and services that are technology driven. But the other thing that is really interesting is just the fact that like there is a movement towards health span and longevity from the private sector. It's really crazy how many companies are like betting on this becoming a bigger and bigger movement. And I'm excited about that because I think it's an opportunity for everyone to think about longevity and health span.
It is. So do you think there's going to be kind of two different, like a split in society though? Because it's like the public system of healthcare is going to be probably unusable. It's just keeping people alive and they're fatter, sicker, more meds. And then there's the people with the knowledge and or the means to pay for the concierge and the good stuff. And I don't know, everyone I know everyone hanging around Austin, they are fit, they are healthy, they are taking health into their own hands.
I know.
Right? And then there's the other people.
I mean, look, so I'm an advisor of a company called Heads Up Health. And like, I hate to say it, but like, if you look at like the financial systems, and there's like obviously like a financial system in the government that's like, got its own, there's a treasury, and then there's like government institutions that run financial products, but there's also like the entire private sector. So I do anticipate that there will be a regulated federal system for healthcare, but I also think that in 20 years, the amount of data that we're going to have for our own personal health is going to be astonishing. And like, just thinking about like the mornings, I don't know how much you know about like fintech, but the Morningstar terminal and Bloomberg terminals and the amount of data that goes into these terminals is like phenomenal. Like you can get so much knowledge from these if you work in these industries. I actually anticipate that for the private sector of health optimization, biohacking, concierge medicine, there's going to be really good technology that is going to be able to feed you information about your health so that you're going to be able to take control of your health, and you're going to be able to work with doctors and health coaches and naturopaths and other clinical practitioners that care about health. And they're going to have a really beautiful system and multiple systems to work off of to actually manage your data streams coming out of your body. So like, I'm very bullish on this. I'm very optimistic about this. Do I think that the mainstream system is going to do this too? Possibly, maybe. I hope so. But I actually think that it's going to be through big tech companies like Apple and Amazon and Google that are going to work with these systems, and they're going to be a bridge layer between the private and the public option. So I do think that innovation, it takes 15 years for things to go from the bench to the bedside, but technology moves fast. So like those of us who are going to be technology savvy are going to have access to this stuff. Those of us who aren't are going to have to wait 15 years, and it's going to take a long time for them to get the same stuff. But it's going to happen. It's just going to take longer.
I think so. I know this. I know your answer to this, but what happens if we have too much technology, like the metaverse? See, that's what I'm worried about. It's like you go too far.
I mean, it's funny because like during the pandemic, I got really because I did experience, I was very close to burning out at the end of 2020. Apparently like 90% of people did. Like it was really bad. Like the end of 2020 was hard. I took a step back from my general, I don't know, like I guess I'd say that the second half of 2020 and the first half of 2021 health-wise was not my best year. Like I'm sure a lot of people would admit the same. Like it was probably not your healthiest time of your life. But it caused me to like revalue and like reconsider, like, am I crazy? Cause I came from California, right? Which is like the land of innovation, and like where a lot of this stuff that I was pioneering was created. And then I moved to the Midwest, and I was like, maybe I don't need to measure everything as much. Maybe I don't need to monitor my blood sugar. Maybe I don't need to like monitor my stress as much. Maybe I do need to be less crazy about my diet. and I gained 10 pounds, and I definitely didn't experience the same kind of mental health. I still worked out, but I feel like I kind of let go of a lot of my things that I would recommend in the book. And yet it's funny because once I got the book deal, I started doing everything again, and immediately saw my health improve. I saw my weight. I started losing weight. I started feeling healthier. I started having more energy. And it was funny because it was like, I think moving to the Midwest made me be like, well, maybe I'm just a crazy Californian and this stuff isn't really necessary. And I actually I think I had a lot of doubt that year in my own knowledge. And I was like, well, because I felt so alien when I moved to a place where everything I was doing was like nobody was doing it. And I actually realized through the reversal of a lot of my health benefits from my lifestyle that actually the stuff I was doing was necessary. Like when I started measuring my movement, when I started measuring my stress, when I started measuring my blood sugar again, my health started to improve again. And I think it was like I wanted to test if I actually believed in everything that I believed in, because I felt like and when you go from feeling like everyone looks at you like you're normal to everyone looks at you like you're crazy, it can make you really doubt yourself. But I'm glad I went through this experience, because what it also taught me was the Midwest is not the same as San Francisco. It's a lot harder to find healthy food. It's a lot harder to get to gyms. It's a lot harder to have the same kind of lifestyle that I was used to having in the Bay, because frankly, the Midwest is not as up to speed with a lot of the stuff that I had learned. And I'm not trying to bash Midwest by any means, but what it did was it humbled me. And it made me realize that if I'm going to try to reach the people in the middle of the country who don't have all of this stuff and bring them into the future, then we have to do it in a way that doesn't make them feel alienated for not having everything that I had in San Francisco. So I think this is part of the reason why I wrote the book, because I was like, well, first of all, expecting people to adopt all the things that I have without a guidebook is really hard to do. So that's part of the reason why I wrote the book, because I was like, well, I know this stuff works now. I know this stuff is valuable, but how am I going to give this to everybody? Because like everybody needs this knowledge, but yet there isn't like a biohacking Bible out there. There's a lot of different books, but what I really feel proud about by my book in particular is that it's a book about personalizing your health journey. It's not about doing everything that I say. It's about like, here are literally all the ways that you can optimize your health. You can pick and choose what works for you. You don't have to do everything in the book, but I want you to learn about how to think about your health before you go and try to optimize your health. And so is technology better? You know what? Not for everybody necessarily. There are people who work on farms, and like I've got friends who like literally they're really, really good health and they don't use a lot of technology. But I do think that there's certain things that you should know about that. For example, I have these friends living on a farm in Puerto Rico, and like one of my friends is using like vape pens galore, and she's going out and she's exercising and she's eating healthy, but she's consuming a lot of these toxins through vape pens. And it's like these nicotine pens. And it's like, you know what? Like, this is not healthy. Even if you are exercising all day long, even if you are eating a healthy diet, like you shouldn't be doing those things too. So maybe, I don't know. The question you had was like, is more technology better? I think that personally, like the Aura Ring is a groundbreaking piece of technology, and it's probably going to be acquired by Amazon for a few $1 billion in like the next few years. Like there's a reason for that. It's great to have insight into your steps, into your resting heart rate, into your sleep, into your stress levels. Like these are big drivers of mitochondrial health. So like if everybody had this data, would we be healthier? I think so. But do we want to live in a nanny state where everybody's getting monitored and everybody's being told what to do? No, like I'm a big believer in health autonomy. I'm not super bullish on the metaverse personally. It's not something that I really think is a place that I don't think that people sitting in front of a computer all day long is going to make them healthier, period. I think we need movement. We need nature. We need to get out into the world. We need to get our hands dirty. We need to like visit farms. We need to know the farmers and the food where we get our food. The increased automation of food production might actually help us feed more people in cities, but that doesn't mean that people should be detached from the food system. I mean, yes, is more fitness technology good? Maybe. More and more people have access to trainers through apps than ever before. It's easier to get in shape than ever before. Like you can download apps for $10 a month and have like really great instructors that are world class teaching you how to be in shape. That kind of technology is great. but like the kind of technology that makes you sit in front of a computer with a screen in front of your face where you're detached from your world. I know people who live in the metaverse, quote unquote, already, and they're miserable. So like, absolutely not. We do not want people to use the metaverse as a surrogate for human connection, because what it is processed human connection. We need real in-person human connection, and the computers
It's
are
like,
not the
yeah, it's
answer
like
to that.
processed food. Yeah, processed. Yeah, fake. It's like it's not the real thing at all. And people think
Yes.
I mean, it's a
It's not the
substitute.
real
It's like a
thing.
poor substitute. So you think you're getting it, like, oh, I have all these online friends, and you don't. It's not real. Yeah.
You don't. They're not going to be there for you if
Yeah.
like something really hits the fan. You know who's going to be there for you? The people that you were there for. Like the best thing you can do for your social health is to give more and to volunteer more and to like help more. Like I think that's actually one of the secrets to my social network being so strong is like in my 20s, early 20s, early in my late 20s, early 30s. And what you should be doing early on in your career is like going out of your way to help as many people as possible and building your network and actually being out in the world. Like being disconnected is the biggest recipe for health decline than anything else. Like this is the thing that I learned teaching at Stanford that I did not realize was the role of human connection in metabolic health. I was like, holy crap, I like completely missed this thing. Like how we interact with those around us actually has a massive role in how our cells function and how safe we feel and how actually how connected we feel has a direct role on our mitochondrial health, because oxytocin, the feeling of connection, safety, trust, and love it's mitoprotective, cardioprotective, anti-inflammatory, and antioxidant. So you can literally improve your cellular health by just being more connected with others. So like tonight, I'm having 9 people over for a potluck dinner party, which you're welcome to come and join us. And it's like, I know that this isn't like necessarily the easiest thing for me to pull off in the middle of a book launch, but I know that like the last 3 days, I spent a lot of my time alone in front of my computer, and I literally need human connection to feel safe and to feel connected, to feel happy and healthy. And it's better for me to actually have people come over than to spend more time on my own.
I think that's the big reason why the blue zones exist. I mean, I have 2 reasons from Whole
Yep.
Foods. I don't care. A lot of people try to make it about they're more plant-based.
Yep.
They're not plant-based. I visited some of them. My good nutrition friend has visited a lot of them. They're not plant-based. They eat whole foods and they have the sense of purpose, connection, community, all that stuff.
Yes. That's it. And the thing is like they move their bodies more. What a lot of people don't realize about social connection is that the more socially connected you are, the more social, the larger your sphere of social connection is. What do I mean by that? Literally, when you go and visit people, you're literally expanding your world. So you're actually moving your body to go see different people in different places. And one of the things that can happen as you get older and less connected socially is you can become socially frail. That means that your sphere of your interactivity in the world gets smaller and smaller. So like the radius of your house that you go and explore outside of gets smaller and smaller and smaller. And there are millions of people in the world that are bedridden and house ridden. Literally, they have not left their homes. And this actually has gotten a lot worse during the pandemic when we isolated people. So as we get older and we stop moving our bodies as much, we become not only socially frail, but there's a connection of social frailty and physical frailty. So literally just not moving your body as much is going to actually change your physiology and lead to muscle wasting and actual physical frailty. And so there's a bidirectional relationship between frailty and social frailty and social frailty and frailty. And this is something that I think a lot of people don't totally understand, but your muscles are like big power packs or like battery packs. And so literally if you don't use them, you lose them. And so there's this thing called the adaptive capacity model. And it's that if you use your muscles and you use your mitochondria and you exercise your body, that sends a signal to your body that you need to make more mitochondria. But if you move your body less and less, then you have less and less mitochondria. So this is why when people move their bodies less as they get older, their muscles waste, they become frail, their world gets smaller, and they waste away. And so does their social network. And this is one of the biggest things that I think we can prevent by just education. It's like a lot of people are like, well, how do I make friends? Like I've been asked this on so many podcasts recently, like, how do you make friends? And I'm like, oh my God, did you know that 1 in 5 men and 1 in 10 women do not have any friends? I was like, my brain just blew up into pieces when I realized, holy crap, this is a big issue. And so I'm like, well, how do you make friends? Because like for me, I actually think I have too many friends and I need to actually cull my social network a little bit because I have like way too big of a network. And it's just hard for me to maintain all those people. But for me, one of the biggest ways to make friends is like, first and foremost, if you have one friend, you can make 10 friends, because people, like, if you have friends, they can introduce you to more people. So one of the things that I love doing is I love having people over and helping people become friends. Like, I love introducing people. So you can ask other people to introduce you to people. That's a simple favor that a lot of people would be willing to do for you if you just ask. Very, very simple solution. Another thing is hobbies, right? So like there's a lot of fitness clubs in Austin. There's a lot of sports clubs. There's a lot of volleyball. There's a lot of like gyms and social, and like gyms and fitness is a great way to make friends. It's just joining a gym, and going to classes, saying hi to people in your classes, going regularly and having multiple interactions with people is going to increase trust, because they're going to be like, well, I see you all the time. So, like, yeah, I know who you are now, right? So familiarity, trust, and proximity are really key for creating relationships. So I have an amazing neighborhood in Austin, and I specifically invite people in my neighborhood over for dinner so that I can, and just over for hangouts, so that I can actually build my network that is near me. And so food is a great way to do this. So just holding dinner parties. You do this a lot at the Sapien Center. You have people over all the time for like events and potlucks, and just like instigating people coming together for connection. When I was a kid, my family had a lot of dinner parties with friends coming over. That was a big way of building our social network as a family. And we had other kids come over, and we had neighbors come over. And like, I think a lot of parents and families can feel very isolated because there's so much going on in the family and so many events, and like kids have like social events to go to and this and that. But it's important for families to come together with other families and to throw dinner parties and potlucks together, so that because like really the beauty of social connection is that like you come together and you share information and resources. And like I get so many things done work-wise in through social connection that it pays for itself. Like me spending 50 to $100 to have a dinner party is going to reap many dividends in like the connections that I get for my work. And so I think people need to see this not just as an opportunity for just having fun, but like it's going to make your work more productive. It's actually going to bring more revenue into your businesses. It's going to expand your possibilities for your work. And then like when people travel to different cities, one of the things that I recommend is like, if you know someone in that city, hey, ask them to invite you to things, and ask them to, hey, can we put together a dinner party? Can we put together an event? Because you can build your network in other cities that way. And then I also make friends through social media. Like I certainly have made a bunch of friends in Austin through just people being like, hey, I see you on social media. Do you want to come to this event? And that's opened up a bunch of doors for
All
me
good
in a new
stuff.
city.
Yeah, we've not got into like how to build friends on this podcast,
Yeah.
but I think there's one more thing too, is you mentioned just generosity and giving back, and that's so huge. It's like just a lot of
Yes.
people are just like me, but it's like the fastest way to make a friend is genuine giving, and genuine just like not being about yourself,
Yeah.
being about how can I like invite
You know
this
what?
person to
You're
someone
right.
instead of asking for something. It's like, how can I add value to their business or their life before thinking of yourself?
Yeah. I realized last year that I felt a little self-centered because I was doing so many different projects, and I felt like I feel like I was getting so much from other people, but I wasn't giving as much as I could. So one of my goals for 2023, one of my New Year's resolutions has been, how can I give back to my community more and more and more? Like, what can I do to give more? And there's this guy, Randy Garn, that I met at a mastermind in Utah. And he made a really big impression on me, because he was like, do as many things as you can selflessly without expecting anything in return. And I was like, oh my God, I don't think I've been living that way enough. And yet, early in my 20s and 30s, I think I lived them. I think I was just building my reputation, building my career, and I think I did that more. But as I started to give back more, I realized that like I felt better. Like one of the fastest ways to feeling good is to give. And like that's something that we don't get taught enough, is like generosity and gratitude are like really important facets of positive mental health. And like there's this thing about tithing in every church, right? But like I'm not a part of a church. Like I don't practice a religion anymore. And yet, I think if I gave 10% of my revenue, I would probably see that come back in many, many, many ways. And so I'm looking at this as like almost like a karmic gift to the universe. Like I know that the more I give, the more I get. And so it's like one of my goals this year is just to give more. And like we're heading into a recession. I think a lot of people are thinking, I can't give more. Like I need to I need to like be careful about giving. I need to be careful with my finances. And yes, that's true. You should only give what you're really capable of giving. But I think generosity is something that just it's fundamental to building friendships and building relationships long term is being able to help others.
Yeah, and well, you're kind of giving back in your work, because I know you have sort of a history of not great health. Maybe you just talk more about your personal history.
Yeah. Sure. I mean, I grew up, so I, it all started at birth. I had a cord prolapse. So I was being birthed and then the cord was wrapped around my neck and then it was over my head. And so my mom was pushing and I was getting my blood cut off, blood supply getting cut to my head, which I do think played a role potentially in my ADD. But, so the doctor that delivered me, she actually had to push me back into my mom's body and then cut me out with a C-section. So it was a pretty traumatic experience being born. And then I developed pneumonia early on as a baby. So I was in the hospital by myself. My parents actually like left me there at one point, and I was like, baby in the hospital with pneumonia. And then I come home, and I had strep throat a bunch as a kid. I had tonsillitis. I felt like I was on antibiotics for a lot of the first few years of my life, which really gave me a disadvantage in the microbiome, and I think contributed to the development of celiac in my body, and also just dysbiosis in general. And I remember when I hit puberty, I had a lot of hormone dysfunction, which I'm sure was partially due to metabolic dysfunction as a result of microbiome dysfunction. And so I remember thinking, gosh, like I don't understand what the heck is going on with my body right now. Like this whole hormone thing is like not cool. And like I just remember thinking someday I'm going to understand my body. Someday I'm going to get this. And I decided to become a doctor in 5th grade because I think of all these health challenges that I had and just this feeling of like, gosh, I just want to understand human suffering. Like I want to understand why we get sick. I want to understand why humans have so much suffering because I want to help be a part of alleviating it. And I got to high school and I remember being very driven and very much like, just like I would do anything to get the grade. You know, I was just like, I would sacrifice sleep. I kind of ate garbage. Like I was a runner, so I was really thin, but I stopped my period because I got too thin as a runner. I developed bulimia at one point because I was trying to stay thin. And so I was really dysfunctional in my health. And yet I had really high grades. I was in student government. I was in like varsity sports. I was in all these, I was like on paper, perfect, right? Like I was like, Mom, Dad, you cannot tell me what to do because on paper, I'm perfect. And I wasn't perfect. I was deeply dysfunctional. And I got to high school, I got to college and I was like pre-med, very sedentary because all I was doing was studying. And my health continued to decline in my 20s because I wasn't exercising and I was just studying the entire time. So by the time I got to medical school, I remember almost having a breakdown because I was just like, I can't do this anymore. This is not going to work for me. I'm a mess. So I go to a psychologist and he's like, you know, you're basically like not depressed or anxious. You don't actually have any mental illness. You're just a stressed out medical student who's not taking care of herself. And I was like, wait, what? This is my fault? And so I basically experienced a big shift in my worldview because I was like, oh, so I have to change my health to change my life. And so I started doing yoga and meditating and I stopped drinking cups of espresso and I started eating normal meals and I stopped eating cereal for meals and I started spending time with my family and started spending time with my friends more. And my grades started to improve. And I went from an average on my step 1 with terrible test anxiety to a 99th percentile on my step 2. And that's when I was like, holy crap. I think that I figured something out here. Like this does not make sense. All my peers were like, I almost passed out on my rounds because I was like, I did not expect to get a 99th percentile on my second board exam because like nobody does that. Like that's not seen in medical school. And everyone's like, you got to give us your secrets. And I was like, all right, I'm going to do something. And so I go to the family medicine department and I was like, hey, so I have an idea. Can I design a course for the students on lifestyle? And like, can I recruit all these doctors? I've already got them. I already asked all these doctors if they'll help teach. They're just going to come in and each of them are going to teach a different lecture. And we're going to make this a course on health optimization. It was called Physician Heal Thyself, Evidence-Based Lifestyle. And it was interestingly the same year that David Katz at Duke, I believe, formed the American College of Lifestyle Medicine. So I was kind of like as a medical student, I was definitely ahead of the curve on health. because I saw that we weren't being taught, lifestyle. We weren't being taught about sleep, movement, stress. We weren't taught about, food. We weren't taught about functional medicine, integrated medicine, osteopathy, acupuncture, lifestyle, relationships. None of that was part of our education. So I was like, well, what if I bring in all these cool doctors that are teaching this stuff differently and bring them in to teach? So it became a course actually added to the curriculum, and I won a bunch of awards for it. But yeah, it was really like this big turning point in my life when I was like, I think I'm going to figure this stuff out. But it wasn't until I'd say the last 3 or 4 years when I really started honing in on the role of trauma in health that I felt like I started really having a full comprehensive perspective on health itself. And it was because I started seeing this massive mental health like epidemic during the pandemic that made me really wake up to the reality that like health just isn't about what we eat and how we exercise and how we sleep and how we move and our stress levels, but it's also about the experiences and the social injuries that occur to us that actually change our nervous system programming and put us in a state of hyperarousal or hypo activity that can actually change our mental function, which can change our physical health. So that's really what the last few years have been about, is like understanding the role of social connection and social disconnection, love and social injury on health itself.
The trauma stuff's super interesting. Our mutual friend Salim with Sound. Shout out to Sound, though. They keep sponsoring our events at Sapien Center. Sparkling water.
Oh my God, so
great
awesome.
Sparkling water beverage. Just thanks to Salim. He's great. He's been connecting me with people and with you, and gave me the book, The Body Keeps the Score. So if maybe you could just talk a little bit more about that trauma stuff.
Sure. I mean, the funny thing about this stuff is that people, when you're a kid, you're like, sticks and stones can break my bones, but words can never hurt me. And that's actually not true. So words definitely can injure people. Like people can be injured by emotional abuse and mistreatment, but also physical trauma can also, you can heal from physical trauma, but can actually leave scars on the nervous system. And so the best research on this is through the research on adverse childhood experiences and resilience factors. So early on in life, children that experience what are called adverse childhood experiences can create the conditions where their nervous system is wired differently than other children. But if they're exposed to parents or parental figures that are nurturing and protective and that actually love them and make them feel cared for, it can protect against those adverse childhood experiences. So love actually can heal, but lack of love can 100% injure people. And this is something that I think over half the DSM is literally is just humans hurting other humans and the consequences of that. And so what's really going on is basically your nervous system is a prediction system, right? It's literally trying to predict tomorrow so that you can survive today. And it wants to prepare you for anything coming at you. And so if it experiences things that hurt and that are painful and that really, 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 really are scary, what can happen is that, especially under, this is Dan Siegel's work, by the way, he's an incredible psychiatrist out of UCLA. When someone experiences an acute trauma, like a PTSD level trauma, what can happen is that their body is flooded with stress hormones. And in the setting of extreme stress and trauma, what can happen is that memory can get stuck in implicit memory. And what implicit memory is it's memory that hasn't been consolidated properly into the past. So it still gets experienced as present. So there's an impaired process of moving this memory that just happened from the past into the present, into the past. And it has to happen through the hippocampus. But if it doesn't get stored there properly because of this amount of stress hormones flooding the system, then essentially your body starts, if it gets triggered by anything that reminds the body and the mind of that memory. For example, let's use the example of sexual trauma. So if a woman has like a rape, for example, their body may, when they go and they experience sex in the future, sex can remind them of that rape. And so their body, instead of relaxing into pleasure and orgasm, the body can go into hyperarousal or hypoarousal, which means the body can tense up, and which can prevent it from becoming physically aroused, so you won't get wet, and so you'll get your muscles can become hypertonic, which means that they'll become extraordinarily tense, which can cause pain. and then you won't orgasm because your body needs the interplay between the sympathetic and the parasympathetic in order to lead to orgasm. But if it's stuck in sympathetic hyper arousal and hypervigilance because of that rape, then you're not going to actually be able to have that orgasm, which is why sexual dysfunction is a big, like, it turns out that of all the women who experience rape, only 30% of them develop develop PTSD, but about 60 to 80% of them develop sexual trauma. Sexual dysfunction. So 30% develop PTSD, 60 to 80% develop sexual dysfunction. So I studied this because I experienced a couple date rapes in college, and I didn't really understand how these changed my sexual function, because I was like, I just thought that sex wasn't that great in my 20s. I was like, well, this is just what sex is like. And then I started studying this in my 30s because I accidentally healed sexual dysfunction with a partner in my late 20s when we were experimenting with MDMA. And I didn't learn what MDMA did for the body until MAPS came along and started studying MDMA for PTSD. And they were basically finding that people were they had administered a therapeutic protocol with MDMA in therapy. And they were finding that like 68% of people who went through their protocol had healed their PTSD. And I was like, well, what the heck is going on here? And as it turns out, what they're doing is when you flood a system with a medicine that basically reproduces the neurobiology of love, and you revisit those painful memories, what's happening is they're able to reconsolidate those painful memories from the implicit memory to explicit memory. They're literally filing that memory as safe, and they're changing that memory's experience as painful to not painful. So this is the frontier of psychiatry today, is like, can we actually reprogram painful experiences and move trauma from the present experience, from the triggered experiences, and turn it into a experience of like safety. And so what we're doing at Adama Bioscience is we're developing a drug agnostic therapy for sexual dysfunction, because there are millions of women like me who've experienced sexual trauma, and there aren't a lot of good solutions for their sexual dysfunction. So like, I'm talking to MAPS about working with them to implement our protocol once they get approved for MDMA assisted therapy. And then we're also looking at other interventions, specifically things like PT-141, which is a peptide that can improve arousal. And we're basically trying to pioneer a new approach to sexual dysfunction, specifically due to things like trauma and relationship problems and even mood disorders.
Very cool. You're doing a lot of interesting things.
Thanks.
Is that the focus of the company?
Adama Bioscience, yeah. Well, the Adama Bioscience is literally, it means to fall in love in Latin. So the whole goal of the platform, it's really a platform approach to the science of love. And so the Western model of love and it is really based on the science of evolutionary biology. So there's the sex drive, there's a romantic love drive, and then there's the pair bonding drive. And then beyond pair bonding, there's familial bonds and social bonds. And so the neurobiology of this is essentially based on, it's like kind of based on this idea of, so the sex drive is like testosterone and estrogen, right? So we need to have sex hormones in order to actually have a sex drive. So if you have sex hormone deficiency and you don't replace them, you might not have a sex drive. Like, that's very much a big problem for a lot of women with menopause, a lot of men who have hypogonadism. And this is why there's an entire industry around supplements and Clomid from my friend's company, Maximus. And there's also companies that are using testosterone replacement and peptide therapy to change, testosterone, to change sex hormones. But then with romantic love, this is a really fascinating area, because like, essentially I started the company commercializing an MDMA alternative, but I patented the drug, but we're not really sure how we're going to commercialize it, because it's a really complex drug to commercialize in America. But it's essentially a sexually activating MDMA-like experience. So we may be able to license it to other companies if they want to reverse engineer it. But I'm a little bit more conservative about the love drug field, because I think it's somewhat risky for the world. And I think we need a lot more science before we bring these out as therapeutic interventions. And then there's, but I do think that the science of love is really key for understanding how to maintain passion and desire in long-term relationships. Like, we need to understand romantic love better through science in order to do this. And I do think that there is a role in MDMA assisted couples therapy for this reason. Justin Mares, I'm sure wrote a great few paragraphs in one of his most recent newsletters about how his own experience with psychedelics in his personal relationship with his partner has transformed his marriage and actually helped him explore topics with her that he was unable to actually approach, because it can be really uncomfortable to talk about things that are that when it comes to love and relationships, like a lot of things get shoved under the rug. So he and other investors that I'm friends with have basically described MDMA helping them maintain their relationships. Now, Anne Wagner in Toronto is studying this, and I'm really grateful that there are researchers across the country that are actually doing clinical research studies on conjoint therapy for MDMA to actually identify how do these medicines actually impact relationships. And Adama Bioscience intends to be a company to like take a lot of this science and bring it into products and services for the masses. So another thing that we're working on is social connection measurement tools, which is a long-term vision, and it's more of like an innovation project that I'm working on right now. Is like on the back end, but I really think that we need tools for measuring social connection so that we can know what to do about how to improve it at scale. So that's kind of like a long-term vision. But what I'm really mostly focused on right now is modern sex therapy, because sex therapy hasn't been innovated in 50 years. And I think there's a really great opportunity to develop a new sex therapy for people with sexual dysfunction secondary to things like social injury and relationship problems.
Very cool. Yeah, no, I know you're into a lot of the more women's health side, and maybe we could get more into that, because I haven't had many, podcasts dedicated to that. Although, I mean, we don't have that much time left, but maybe you could.
Yeah, we can dig into it a little bit. I mean, so I wrote the book on biohacking for women, but it's really a book on biohacking for anyone. But I wanted to really help women understand that like they may need to biohack a little bit differently than men, just because of our biological imperatives being different. So like, I am not one of those people in the world that believes that we need to live in a genderless society. That is just not my personal philosophy. So I might get, attacked for this, but I really do believe that men and women have different biology, and it's kind of irrefutable at this point. And at the same time, I have a masculine side, I have a feminine side. I certainly believe that everybody has masculine and feminine facets of their personalities, but fundamentally, I have the biology of a woman. So I have to biohack a little differently. I noticed that a lot of the stuff that was working for my clientele wouldn't work the same for me or my female clients. And so we had to be a little bit more gentle with our bodies. And women in particular have a tendency towards things like orthorexia, anorexia, bulimia. And so we need to be very careful with how we use these devices for monitoring our health so that we don't end up with obsessive compulsive behaviors around data. We also need to be aware that our stress levels can break our hormones more quickly than men. So I see subclinical hypothyroidism very, very commonly in women. And I've seen a lot of women who are biohacking develop relative energy deficiency of sport. And I think this is because they've taken biohacking to the extremes. So I've seen health influencers and friends of mine who have very low body fat percentages stop their period. And it's because they're literally under consuming calories for their fitness levels. And they're like, well, I don't understand. It's like, well, your body's literally going to prioritize survival over reproduction. So if you don't gain weight, you're not going to be fertile. So you need to put some pounds on. And they're like, and this is a big problem for a lot of women who feel that the thin ideal is what they should be doing in society. But unfortunately, I think that women come in all sizes and shapes. And this idea of being super skinny and low body fat is maladaptive to fertility. But at the same time, there's quite a lot of women out there that have insulin resistance and have PCOS and have obesity and overweight, or they have visceral fat and they have problems with their fertility specifically because they have metabolic dysfunction. So a big part of the book is teaching women that like, if you want to improve your metabolic dysfunction, you're going to need to maybe employ some carb cycling, ketosis, a little bit of intermittent fasting, and knowing who should do what is the challenge. And this is what the book's trying to teach people, is like the personalized approach to optimizing your health, and not just bandwagoning and saying, I'm going to go do a ton of ketosis, a ton of fasting, a ton of HIIT training, a ton of weightlifting, and think I'm going to be healthy. A lot of men can do that. I've seen it. And I've seen men just thrive on just biohacking the crap out of their bodies. But with women, I've seen them break more more commonly from too much stress. And so this is part of the reason why I'm trying to like teach a more measured approach, a more personalized approach to optimizing health, and also understand that like fasting and ketosis are tools in the toolbox for improving metabolic health, but they're not for everybody. Not everybody needs to do them. If you have insulin resistance, as I personally did in 2014, I was borderline pre-diabetic and I had no idea. And here I am thinking I'm super healthy, young and fit, and I wasn't at all. In fact, I had a lot of work to do. And it took me years of biohacking my body to get myself into a state of metabolic health. And we're constantly changing over time. So our periods mean that we are literally changing throughout the month. So like I have a different physiology depending on the different phase of my cycle. And women have different physiology depending on their lifespan. So like a a woman who hasn't hit puberty is not this, or a girl is not the same as a girl going through puberty, is not the same as a woman in their 20s, is not the same as a woman in her 30s, is not the same as a woman in her late 40s or early 50s. Like we're constantly changing throughout our lives because of our hormone shifts. So we have to acknowledge that and realize that there's things that we can do to monitor our hormones and monitor our metabolism to optimize our health.
Super important. And I think guys can get away with it more, but I still think that's a thing too. I don't believe in this like long-term ketosis, like too many stressors, like too much fasting, too much, all the stuff. I'm like, no, you can have the same kind of symptoms of low thyroid function. And like, I notice my body temperature going down.
You can.
You know, I'm like, oh man, like, why are my hands and feet cold all the time? And then that's why I like to, talk about my journey and also just the difference between carbs, the difference between, there's so much context to it. It's like I'm into blood sugar regulation, but that doesn't mean I'm against carbs. You know what I mean? Like you can do a workout and then have some sweet potatoes and your blood sugar can be perfectly fine. It can rise a little bit and then come right back down very quickly.
But it's also very dependent on your individual body. And like, so if I eat a lot of sweet potato, I will get a blood sugar spike. But that's because sweet potato just for me isn't the thing that works for me. I can eat half a banana and not get a blood sugar spike, but if I ate a whole banana, I will. So this is why I love wearing a glucose monitor, because you can literally see what's going to work for you and what's not. And it's very personal. And so the glycemic index was basically the average of 1,000 people's response to one food. But what we're learning is that you need to figure out your own personal glycemic index, because that may be predictive, but not totally true if you actually put these blood sugar monitors on and actually see what you respond to. So there's a lot of companies out there that have commercialized different tests for using the microbiome to help predict which foods work best for your metabolism. But I think the fastest way to figure this stuff out is just to put a blood sugar monitor on.
Absolutely. You learn so much. I don't know. It's great. So tell me a little more about, the difference between women in these different stages of their life and how they can.
Yeah. So when you're in your 20s and your teens, you're going to be able to metabolize carbs pretty quickly and easily because you have so much pancreatic organ reserve. But if you're really overtaxing your pancreas over many, many years, you might find that in your 30s, you start seeing your metabolism change and your hormones start to shift. You actually see all of your hormones start to go down in your 30s, which is part of the reason why when I was in my late 20s, I remember being in medical school and this doctor's like, well, you're all soon going to be advanced maternal age. And, I was like, oh, shoot, like this is not what I realized was going to happen. So a lot of women are like, there's this idea that there's this infertility epidemic going on, but actually that may be partially true. But the truth is that more and more women are having babies later and later. And more of our fertility is going to decline as we get older. This is just a part of life. I do think that if young women in their teens and their 20s really had the knowledge that I have in this book, and if I had this knowledge younger, I think we're going to be able to see a shift in fertility, and we're going to be able to actually extend fertility longer. There's a lot of really cool science coming out of pausing fertility and actually extending, like potentially even stopping menopause. Like that could be in our lifetime. Like there's a bunch of companies working on this, and I'm so hoping to God in the next 10 years that somebody figures this out, because one of the reasons why women age differently than men is because our ovaries stop producing sex hormones. So like I'm personally going the Suzanne Somers route, and I'm going to be replacing my hormones as I get older, and I'm going to be monitoring for breast cancer. But not everybody can do that because some women have the BRCA mutation. Some women have risk factors for breast cancer. Suzanne Somers actually got breast cancer, and she still takes hormones. So like we have a lot of of like sort of like there's a lot of things that we need to do to basically gauge what we need to do for our bodies as we get older as women that men just don't have to do as much of. Because men, generally speaking, don't go through andropause is not considered to be nearly as devastating to women to health as menopause is. And there's a lot of confusion in women's health when it comes to menopause and even birth control, because like, essentially like birth control is a risky business for women who are trying to find a partner. Like I have a friend who was with a partner and got married, and they were deciding they wanted to start having kids, and she went off birth control and she has no attraction to her partner anymore.
I've heard of this.
Like it's gone.
Yeah, I've heard of this.
And like, it's because her pheromones have changed. And so she's really genuinely concerned about maintaining a relationship with this person because she has absolutely zero attraction to him left. On top of that, like there's this question of like, is birth control healthy or not? I've met a lot of young women who've gone off birth control and found they've been having problems with liver issues. They've been having problems with mood disorders. And it's like, it can really, really change your hormones to be on birth control for long periods of time. So it's a very personal thing that you need to choose to do with a conversation with your doctor and what's best for you and your body. But I'm really excited that we have technology like Oura Ring and Natural Cycles that can help people predict their fertile window. But yeah, I mean, to me, like this is a very controversial topic to go through, right? It's like are hormones right for you? Should you should you take hormones through menopause? The Women's Health Initiative basically convinced all these women that hormones will inevitably lead to cancer. Well, that's just not true. Hormones will make cancer grow faster if you have cancer growing, but it's not necessarily going to cause you to get cancer. So, a lot of the stuff that was used in the women's health initiative, like Premarin, for example, was horse urine, progesterone. We don't use that anymore, and they started a lot of women on hormones after they'd been completely through menopause through like 10 years later. That's also not recommended anymore. So I think that hormones and low doses are safer as we get older. I would be cautious when you're younger on birth control, just because of the fact that it may change your attraction to your partner, especially if you are trying to look for a partner to have a child with. So what I do now is, like, in my 30s, I basically only had sex with men that I would be willing to have children with. That's a really strict way to have sex, right? But like, it is safer than for me. Like I just didn't want to be on birth control anymore, so I went off of it for that reason. Yeah, the book The Spark Factor is a book that anybody can read, men and women. I think men would really benefit from reading it because I think it would help them understand their partners if they do date women, or are they married to women. I think it's a great tool book for men to understand women's physiology and women's health. But a lot of the stuff is very much applicable to men. And I also have an online course called Your Healthspan Journey that was based on the course I taught at Stanford. So if people want to learn more about my philosophy of health, it's a super comprehensive curriculum on health. And it's actually on sale right now with the pre-sale for the book. So you can go to my website, www.drmolly.co / The Spark Factor, and you can buy the book on Amazon and Barnes and Noble, and it's going to be on sale. You can pre-order it now, but it's the 31st is when it's publishing. So we're really excited about getting this book out there, and I'm super grateful that you had me on your podcast today, Brian.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, it's a big achievement to get a book out there. I'll tell you that. And so far it's great from what I've read, and I encourage everyone to grab it. And then you're also Dr. Molly or drmolly.co on Instagram.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Good stuff. Well, thank you so much for coming on. And hopefully I'll see you soon around Austin.
Cool.
Yeah.
Sounds great.